Okay, cool. So we're recording. So to anyone who's watching from YouTube, welcome to our little kind of student catch-up and with a peer mentor session on contracts and basically a bit of some IRAC. I apologise in advance. It looks like I've been hit by a truck. I had 20 minutes sleep last night, so I'm pretty on empty. I might start with you guys just giving me a bit of a yell out on what's getting you, and then if I can understand where the issues are, I'll be able to give you some basic advice. So, what's causing the most issues for you guys at this point?
I think for me, it's mainly trying to understand from the issues that I find in a case how I apply the rule of law for the issue.
So I have, when I started Contracts B, I had AJ, who most of you probably know from Law by Distance, and she has given us her top tips on how to do an IRAC. So I will email these through to anyone who doesn't actually have them, because she makes it really, 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 really clear. So I think the most important thing when you're doing an IRAC is obviously you're obviously finding the right issue is the start. But once you've got that issue and you know, I think this is what I saw with your work anyway, Chloe, is you seem to know what the issue is and you know what the rule is. To break it down, this is how I did it anyway. When you, so with the intention to create legal relations, for instance, in your text, there should be a list of elements, and that will be pretty much any rule that you have will have a list of elements that need to be met in order for that rule to be applied. Make sense? So, and each of those elements will be attached to an authority case. So what you need to be doing is applying the general principles of the case authority to your case. So say, for instance, I need a demonstration. So basically, you've got, so take your element, take your case. In your contracts, do you all have the contracts case book? Because a lot of what you'll find your problem questions will actually have the authority cases in that case book. The best part about the case book is it will take you straight to the reasoning behind the judgments. So, especially when you start, what I found anyway is when you're looking at the cases online, you're getting so much in the judgments, and it's really hard as a new student to be able to pick apart from that judgment what the actual reasoning behind that judgment is, because they'll bring in all sorts of arguments. So have you guys learned about your EBITDA dicta and your ratio yet properly? So, okay, so the ratio decidendi is the actual reasoning behind a judgment. It's what concretes that judgment and what makes it authority for a certain rule. So the EBITDA dicta, and this is where I got caught up in, when you're reading the cases online, there'll be other cases brought in and there'll be other elements discussed, because of course it takes more than one element to, you know, to get a judgment. But So what you really want is that ratio, and that will be what makes it the authority case. So to avoid any kind of confusion, your contract book will have that. So your contract, the case book, focuses primarily on the ratio and the reasoning behind the judgment for that case. So when you get your problem questions, you'll see a similarity in the facts of the case that you're, like in the facts that you're given, to the facts of certain cases, case authorities that you'll have been expected to learn throughout the subject. And if you aren't up to date with your readings, it's okay, because you can go to your textbook. The contracts textbook's actually really, really amazing. Where it outlines your elements, always check the footnotes, because the case authority for that element will be footnoted. And then anything that's really important will be in that contracts casebook, and it will have the reasoning behind it, and it will help you to understand more about those rules and those elements and why they are, like how they've come to those decisions. Because setting out your rules in your IRAC is easy. It is pretty much dot point form. This is the rule. These are the elements that need to be satisfied in order to meet this rule. But it's the application part where you need to apply those elements. And the only way that you can apply those elements successfully is to discuss the facts of the authoritative cases in line with the facts of the scenario that you're given. Is that making any sense? Because what your lecturer is going to look for, and I'll read you a bit of this thing that's AJ's written. Okay, I'll just read it out. Application, insert magical rainbow here. This is where your marks are made. She's not kidding. And it really is. Pretty much anyone can pick out the issue. That's not designed to be difficult. The rules and elements, they're all attached in your textbook. You look up, you can pretty much find whatever you're looking for, and it sets out the elements in order. But the application part is really where you're going to get good marks. Knowledge of the case law, identifying and discussing the relevant legislation or cases. I'd really like to think that they're not going to push you too much in Contracts A on legislation, but there may be consumer law in there. I know that we did touch upon the ACCC when we did Contracts A. I'll send this sheet through to you, but this is you don't need to refer to consumer law in this kind of system. Okay, beautiful, that's perfect. So for your current assessment, have you been able to pick out which case your problem question is based on? Is there any kind of, with AJ it was easy. As soon as you read the problem question, you could pretty much pinpoint the case that she was creating the question around.
There's several in this one. It's like a 3 or 4 tiered one. Okay. Yeah. So, and they do all pretty much relate to the readings. If you've done that reading for that particular time frame, you'll pick it up. Yeah. It's just like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So have they given you more than one scenario, or it's just multiple issues within?
That's correct. Yeah. So one very long scenario with at least 3 issues that I've identified anyway within that thing, and one of the 3 can be taken 2 ways as well.
Yeah. Okay. So have you guys looked at Anthony's Skills Week guide?
We're not. I don't think we're up to that yet.
Haven't given that. Okay. So
I think it's week 8.
It's literally going to be, if it's still the same as when I did it.
I've looked at it and it's amazing. Everyone should get in there and have a look at it now.
It is honestly, so for me, when I did Contracts A, I used it as my Bible. When I answered my problem question, I literally went through and I did it exactly how he's done it. You really can't go wrong if you follow how he's set it out, because it also helps you set out when there's multiple issues as well. And yeah, setting out the different legal relationships as well within the scenario. I know it's really, really long-winded, as Anthony can tend to be a little bit, but it's under week 7, Shanae. If it's the same as when I did it, it should be week 7. And his is pretty intense, but if you're struggling to understand the material, then you should do it his way. Like, so if you're picking the material up pretty well, you can literally go straight to his example answer and just set it out the way he's set it out, because let's face it, you don't really need to go through all the other stuff if you're just looking for help on how to actually format your answer. But I do suggest that if you're having drama working out how to actually apply what you're learning, then take the time and really go through step by step what he's done, because it will help. It will really, really help. It's his is pretty intense. There's a lot of stuff going on in this one, and I would like to think that your question isn't. Who do you guys have? Who's teaching you?
Susan Bird.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's who I had. So Susan's brilliant. She's really, really good. And generally speaking, look, when I had her questions aren't designed to trip you up. And I did really, really well with Susan by following Anthony's Skills Week. So I think it's really important that you have a look at that. I will also send you through, I'll send through to anyone who doesn't have it, I'll send you through AJ's IRAC top tips. They should actually be available on file in LVD, I would think. So we tend to have most of the important information on file there. Yeah, they are there. Excellent. So then it's pretty much just working through everything in a logical order, and LVD should have files, a file section on, I think it's like the search bar on the left if you're on a computer. Is it the skills sample? Got it? Is it the skills sample problem? Is it nothing under skills week? Yeah, let's have a look. So it should have...
If you're on a computer, it's under files on the left-hand side.
Yeah.
There's a whole heap of files and the IRAC is in there.
And Shanae, on week 7, do you not have skills?
No, there's nothing under there.
You've got nothing in there.
It just says a discussion about answering legal problems, and that's all it said.
Okay, is there a study guide there?
Yeah.
There should be a study guide.
Oh, so the study guide.
Yeah, so the study guide has got the skills. So the study guide for that week will become your Bible for contracts.
All right.
Yeah, it will really, really help. It'll help you to understand. Like I said, it's pretty complex. Considering Anthony wrote it, I'm not overly surprised. But when you pair it with AJ's IRAC top tips, so hers are really nice and basic, and his is like takes it kind of next level, so you can really, really get in and see exactly how he kind of goes through it. Big tip for when you're writing your IRACs, don't do long-winded quotes from judgments. This is something that I struggled with a little bit early in my degree. Sometimes it was easy to make up word count by sticking in quotes because I'm not a very wordy person. But like take what you can from those quotes that you're finding amazing and put it into your own words and apply it to your problem question so that you can show them that you have knowledge of the case and you can find the right bits in the judgments, but not only can you find the right bits, but you know how to apply it to what you're actually learning. And look, honestly, this is a skill that takes time, and it does get easier and it will be different. So what Anthony's done is very contracts based. I wouldn't take on exactly how he's done it into other subjects because I've done that and got crucified for it. Because there's so many elements in contracts, you generally don't discuss the elements where there is no issue. So, you know, with contracts, you've got offer and acceptance, consideration, intention, etc. You're not going to discuss all of those things if there's no issue. So you're obviously only going to discuss the areas where there's an issue. But one thing that I found in Anthony's Skills Week guide is that he actually sets out the authority for offer and acceptance, consideration, etc., and then says, but will only be addressing the things that are of an issue. So that's what I did with Susan. I think there's a number of ways you can do that. He's just listed them in kind of a paragraph. I ended up setting one out in the table. But so it shows that you know the elements of the contractual elements, but, you know, if you were to go through everything and cite cases, be there all friggin' year. So obviously you just stick with the ones that are of an issue. The contracts textbook has got so many really great case summaries, and I think even if you don't read everything, like if you're a bit of a lazy reader like me, the one thing that you should be doing is reading those case summaries, because it helps put into perspective just those elements that you're learning. And if you are one of these students who tends to get swamped by having so much to do and you just can't really keep up with how much reading there is, know your study guides and then read those case summaries, and it should piece everything together. And then and I know, Chloe, you were asking at one point whether I read the whole case or part case. I think while you have a case book, just stick with your case book, and especially while you're still learning, because it's so, so difficult to pull out of a judgment, especially one that's like 40, 50 pages. Exactly. And sometimes you've got conflicting judges too. You've got conflicting judgments. So you don't want to be confusing yourself, and especially in contracts when you've got the case book, just stick with that. And like when you do STAT, and as those who've done STAT before will know, it's something that you'll get taught how to read a case properly. It's a bit full on. it's something that you can do if you've got extra time, but I know most of us are time poor, which is why, it's important to really focus on what you need to be knowing at this point. But again, to apply your rules, you have to be referring back to authority, because there's no point just trying to, explain your rules and in an application without authority to back that up. So to use the authority cases mentioned instead of rather than. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's so true. Use what they give you, for sure. Because again, like, whilst we all want to show off our knowledge and what we can find and all the rest of it, at this stage, they know what they're looking for. And the best thing that you can do is, and this is what I found with most of my lecturers, is you can generally get a feel for what they're looking for. And it will vary from lecturer to lecturer. But if you can really knuckle in on what they want from you, at the end of the day, they're the ones marking your papers. So, yeah, that's it. They're giving you the authoritative cases for a reason. There's no reason to look outside the authorities. That they're going to be your strongest argument anyway. And again, those authoritative cases will all be the ones that are highlighted in the textbook and that are in the case book. When it comes to searching other cases and all the rest of it, like, that's all going to come in our legal research, and there will be other things, like other subjects where we're expected, and you are expected to look at other cases, but especially in things like torts and contracts, even criminal law. Or I guess criminal law, you're probably even looking at other cases, but torts and contracts are so case-based and precedent-based that you just use those main authorities that you're given, because they are the ones that you would argue in court. And again, like I've said before, these guys are the ones that are marking assignments. They want to know that you're listening to them. They want to know that you're paying attention, and they know their stuff. So, what other questions do you guys have? Shoot them at me, because I'm a yabberer. I'll just keep talking.
I think I have a question. I haven't got my thought process right just yet. So, like, when I did intro last term, and we had to, like, we were finding stuff on the different IRAC issues and stuff like that. We did a lot of quoting from the textbooks for definitions and explanations of how it all works. But for this assessment, we don't really have, it seems like you don't really have to rely too much on doing stuff from the textbook, rather than just creating your own words and making your own story back, your own advice or whatever back. So how much referencing do you actually need? Is your references just your cases at the bottom, or are your references like info from judgments? Do you make that in your reference section rather than in your actual letter of advice or whatever you're doing in answering the question? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So with contracts, most of your referencing will be cases, because your authorities will be cases. And whilst a lot of what you're learning is coming from the textbook, they don't want to see you quote the textbook. So what I found is anything that I find, because you aren't really giving definitions, and even when you are stating a rule, again, that rule is based on an authority. So what you want to that is the case authority. So your references will be your authorities. And then if you do a judgment, then again, it'll be from the case.
Yeah. So, sorry, I jumped in from someone then. So if I'm, say, doing something and I say this is in line with the homogeneous case, do I just like say homogeneous and then down the bottom in my reference I put the whole case with its where you find it in the book?
Yeah.
I've got animals everywhere.
Yeah.
Or do you quote the whole case when you're writing your bit and then put it again down the bottom? Bless you.
Wouldn't you use the AGL's referencing for that, Diane?
Yeah, definitely, but I just don't know whether you put the whole case in what you're writing, or you just put, like, say, R.V. Clark, if that was what you were doing, and then you put R.V. Clark, the date, or wherever you found it from, the year, blah blah blah.
Sorry about that.
You're right.
Yeah. In text, you only need the name of the case, and
then in the reference, you put all the bits in brackets and the CLRs and stuff like that. Okay.
Be very careful though. If you're saying something about a case, oh, sorry. God, I'm dying. Oh my gosh. If you're saying something about a case that you've read in the textbook, and the textbook has made a comparison to the case, be careful that if you're using that you do actually reference the textbook, because that's something that you've learnt from the textbook. If you're making your own observations about the case from the judgment or whatever you've learnt, and you're relating it back, then reference the case only. But the last thing that you want is for a lecturer to go and be able to see that you've taken something that you're learning or that the textbook has said and then applying it as though it's your own thoughts on the case. So for safety reasons on that, quote the textbook, and then you can semicolon and put the case the case reference as well. And sometimes that can be good just to show that you have looked into the case that the textbook has actually made the comparison to, and have something in there to show that you've actually looked at the case to state that you understand why it's being said. Just because I know that I did this, I did quote the text for certain things, but yeah, it's good if it obviously where it relates back to a case. And sometimes the textbook will say things and they won't give you an authority for it. And if there's absolutely no authority for what they're trying to explain to you, sometimes that's all you've got, which will be fine in an A subject. Won't get away with it in later subjects. They don't want textbooks, they want authorities. At the end of the day, your textbook isn't an authority. It's just a learning tool.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just to follow on, because I have not done a bibliography for God knows how many years, what is the difference between the referencing at the bottom of your page and a bibliography?
Bibliography is just your end page with just like so with all of your references. AGLC, I think, has somewhere to explain how the bibliography should be set out. There's a certain order
So does it just repeat what's on the bottom of your page?
Yeah. But so, you know, when you're doing your referencing in your assignment, once you've referenced something, you don't need to write the whole thing again. You just put IBID and the number of your reference.
Yeah.
So essentially, it's just cutting down all your references to so they can see in one page what your references are without having to go through 1,000 footnotes, really.
I just need to go learn how to do that. Yeah.
It's like a quick reference. It's very simple. It's a lot of cut and paste. But double check the AGLC for the order that you'd like to have it in. Yeah.
Just haven't got that far yet. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions?
So, with trying to, I guess, write up the assessment, I feel like I need to use a lot of law language, and I'm not too sure if that's relevant or...
No, keep it very simple. So the only legal language that you need to use in it are the legal terms that you're given. Don't get wordy. You won't get extra marks for it. Just make sure that what you're trying to get across is nice and clear and it's concise. It's not creative writing, so don't. That was another thing that I made a mistake with when I first started. You read these judgments and they're all perfect and everything sounds so professional. We're learning. Your writing will improve as you go along. There's no need for unnecessary long words. One thing that you'll learn throughout your degree is that being able to write in plain English for any layperson to understand is going to be one of your biggest skills. And it's something that they'll really try and teach you. Be very careful not to use any emotive language when you're writing a legal piece. It's one thing I know that's driving Anthony a little bit nuts at the moment, and I'm sure you've probably seen that in LBD. You know, most of us come into this thinking that, you know, a lot of us are passionate about what we're doing, and we feel like if we're trying to advocate for our client that we need to be bold and aggressive, and it's just, you just need to be really, really to the point and to the letter of the law. We don't need to over advocate for our clients. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Look, any extra shoots that Anthony does are probably very worthwhile watching. He is very good at what he does, and I've had a bit of a look over his intro to law makeover, and it's brilliant. It's really, really good. You guys are getting those of you doing intro this term are getting a much broader introduction. And yeah, look, most things are lengthy and boring in the scores. But definitely worthwhile. So yeah, just keep your language simple. Don't stress too much about it. If you're getting across, oh my God, sorry. If you're getting across what you need to, that's all that matters. Just be very careful about spelling and grammar. They're probably the only thing you get penalised on. And look, you won't even, you probably won't even, stop it, go to bed. You probably won't even get penalised for that sort of stuff, but it, you know, just shows, obviously, shows professional writing if you make sure. Okay, darling, if you make sure that those things are in line. Yeah, and if you're concerned about what you've written and you want it checked over, then just flick me an email and I'll have a look over it. Obviously, I won't be commenting on any answers or anything, but I'm happy to have a look over spelling and grammar, and if I think that there's, it's too wordy or whatever, I can help you get your word count under control. Is anyone else any more questions? Please feel free to fire them at me while I'm here.
Yeah, I think like I'm just having a look at AJ's IRAC top tips, and the application or analysis of the IRAC. I'm just trying to get my head around it. So it says here that like knowledge of the case, and then identify and discuss the relevant legislation or cases. So how would I go about using that towards the rule or issues found in my issues?
Okay, so what you need to do is with your rule, like, with your rules, you need to set out your list of elements and the authority for each of those elements. And then work through those elements in relation to the facts that you've been given. So you'll probably, there may be one or two elements that are easily satisfied. You just work through them and say why this element is satisfied or not satisfied. And the way to do that is, so your authority for your element, the facts of the case for that authority, put them up against the facts of the case that you've been given, and try to see where they align or they don't align. The reasoning behind the judgment for the authority, does that fit in line with your facts and issue? Does that make sense? So it's like a step-by-step process. You need to work through each element at a time. Excuse me, give me 2 seconds. Let's get seriously. Yeah, so I don't know, have you looked at the authority for each of the elements? Like, have you broken down the elements in relation to the legal rule? Have you managed to?
So far I've just listed what I think are the issues, and then trying to find out what they relate to in terms of the study guides, like what week they're related to. For instance, I can teach you to create legal relations, and then that's where I'm trying to work out the relevant case sort of meets with that element or something.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find the rule within that, and yeah.
Yeah, so make sure you definitely keep all your issues separate. Work through one issue at a time, otherwise it's going to blow your mind apart. Once you've worked out the issue, get your rule, like I said, create intention to create legal relations. We'll then go to the textbook. What elements need to be satisfied in order for an intention to create legal relations to be satisfied? So if you're arguing before the court that there's been an intention to create legal relations, you need to be able to prove what, and they are your elements. What needs to be proven to say that there was an intention to create legal relations? With each of those elements will be a case authority. So start with your rule. Intention to create legal relations. this means blah, 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 blah. These are the elements that need to be satisfied. These are the case authorities for each element. Then that's where you bring in your application. So then you'll work through each of those elements and apply the facts of the case of the case authority to the facts that you've got, and try and marry them up to see whether they, whether they gel. And if they don't, why there could be an argument that this element isn't satisfied. So at the end of the day, what you're trying to do is you're trying to satisfy all the elements. If you can't satisfy an element, then that rule is broken, and then you've got an argument before the court. So the other thing that you really need to do when you're looking at it is try and take out of it who you're supposed to be representing and who you're supposed to be giving advice to. Try and take that side out of it, because you've got to be able to give them an honest, an honest answer as to whether or not those elements have been satisfied and whether or not they have a case. So it's not about trying to win for your client, it's about trying to give them the best advice possible. It's probably another really important thing to remember when you're doing these legal scenarios is a lot of time, sorry darling, is that a lot of the time lecturers are going to give us things that we can't win for our client, and it'll be designed to make you want to, advocate for them. But at the end of the day, you need to be able to show that you can give the best advice possible, whether or not your client wants to hear it or not. So just, again, mechanical, robotic type process, work through each of those elements, work through each of those case authorities, marry them up with the facts that you've been given. Work one issue at a time so that you're not confusing yourself. Otherwise, it's going to get really, really confusing and really, really irritating. And if you look at that skills week guide of Anthony's, he sets out how to really approach from the beginning if you're struggling to kind of work through those processes. The textbook's really, really good at setting the elements out kind of in order. That's the one thing I found with the contracts textbook, is that the elements are well ordered. But again, those study guides should be quite amazing. So you should be able to get most of your elements and case authorities from the study guides as well. But biggest thing, elements, authorities, marry them up. That application is where all that will come together for you. Is that starting to make a little bit more sense?
Yeah. We have to give case examples to go with our scenario. How important is it to go into detail for the case example, for the authoritative cases that you're giving? Like, is it enough to say this is the authoritative case for the reasoning for why I'm making this decision and why I'm giving this advice in my answer? Do we need to do a lot of reading into that? Do we need to give any quoting from that? How far does it need to go in like a contract A assessment to answer the reasoning why you're giving that case?
Look, in contracts A, I don't think you need to go into any huge detail about the reasoning behind the authority, etc. But if you're looking for the good marks, you'll want to show that you know something about the case, that you can pull from the case the judgment and really understand why that judgment has been made. So I know when I was in contracts A, I didn't do any kind of long spiels, but I did try to make sure that throughout my assessment piece that I would definitely refer to the facts. I think you really need to make sure that when you're stating a case authority, that you can at least give the basic facts of that case and why. It really needs to be very basic. I could probably, I'm not sure what Anthony's got in his skills-based guide, but I could probably give you an example of what I did in mine, but I remember I put in like a couple of little quotes that I thought were really important in showing that I understood the rule and the element and how it needed to be satisfied. So you don't have to go into it for everything, because otherwise you'd be there all day. There's so many elements. So for some, you know what, I think it would probably be enough to simply state the authority for it. But if you're making an argument on something, you really need to show that you understand why you're arguing a certain way, if that makes sense. Like, your argument's going to be more compelling if you can show why that case is the authority, that you know exactly how that element needs to be satisfied and why your element does or does not satisfy, why it does or doesn't satisfy, in your facts. So look, you know, you're only going to get a certain amount of words. So where you feel your argument needs to be the strongest is where you'll put the most work, if that makes sense. Because there are certain elements that will easily be met. Oh, you're as bad as me, poor thing. There are certain elements that will easily be met, and in those cases where there's no need for a strong argument, you really don't need to smash it out. But when you where there's an issue with an element, that's where you really need to show your understanding of it. I think that's probably the most important, and that's probably what Susan will be chasing.
Thank you.
Yes, I hope that makes it a little bit clearer. But again, look, if you have any issues or you get confused or you're second guessing yourself on something, just shoot me a private message and I can walk you through whatever it is that you second guessing yourself on. Has anyone else got any questions? Any concerns? If we're all good, I might end it. I'll put this recording on LVD, and if there's anything I can help with, honestly, just send me a message. I hope I've made things a little bit clearer. Yeah, here if you need me. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
No worries.